Shaun, thank you so much for joining us on the You're Not Alone podcast today. I'm super excited to have you on, man. And I know before I hit record, you're the first UK-based guest that I've ever had on. It's 9:30 p.m. where you are, so you're doing me a solid by jumping on right now. And I feel like in the research that I was doing, there's so many different areas that you're passionate about. They're all tied together, but what you're doing in the OCD space is extremely important, and we're going to dive into the whys behind that. But what I'd like to do is I want to pass it off to you, but what I'll say is that when I was doing some research, I read your blog article on the IOCDF website, and it said that at one point in time, you believed you were a rapist, you were suicidal, and you thought you were gay. And I will tell you, I have struggled with those exact types of thoughts, and that really resonated with me. So can you take us back to the start of the onset of your intrusive thoughts?
Yeah, no, first of all, I want to say thank you for giving me the opportunity to be the first UK individual speaking about my OCD story. I've seen the work you're doing, and it's an honor to be on podcasts like this. You know, even your tagline, "You are not alone," is something that I quite often tell people, especially with OCD. So it fits perfectly with everything that I stand for. So with my OCD journey, as I've written my story, it's been very cathartic for me in the sense of I've been free and I'm no longer a prisoner to it. But as I'm actually exploring, I'm going further and further back. So the pieces I've written, I've actually explored even more. With every piece I've written, I'm uncovering something more. And I would say the first ever time that I had an intrusive thought was when I was working at an addiction clinic. And I was dealing with service users who were addicted to drugs and alcohol. And there was a very somber, very horrible mood in the room, and I'll never forget this. Someone burst out and they wanted to just talk about one of the guys that had killed themselves as a result of their alcohol addiction, and he was gay. And for the whole session, all I could hear in my mind was suicide, 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 and I couldn't stop. And I said, I'm never going back to that addiction clinic ever again. And I never went back, and I went home, and I remember I went into my bed and I just cried and I couldn't stop. I don't really remember what happened after that, but what happened moving on in life was I was having intrusive thoughts about my sexuality. No, it was health anxiety, actually. So I had contracted chlamydia from a girl that had lied to me, and I couldn't stop obsessing every time I went to the toilet. If I felt like I had chlamydia again, if it hurt a little bit, if I had remembered the feeling, I would cancel all my plans and I'd run straight to the clinic. I had to. No matter what I did, I had to cancel all my plans. I had to be reassured. And every time I got the results were never enough. It could never tell me enough. I remember I'd sit there and be like, wait, hold up. I don't have the results. I've got the results, but it says I don't have anything. And in my head, I'll be like, has it been 2 weeks? Has it because of this? Has it been because of that? I couldn't stop the rumination. I couldn't stop trying to reassurance seek. As time went on, it kind of faded. But at my worst, I paid £300 for a same day test just to prove I didn't have chlamydia. Like, it was that obsessive for me. Yes. And my next thought migrated onto HIV. I had this obsession with HIV. I was worried I had HIV. I remember when I was with one of my partners, I was like, no. I remember I said to her, I'm convinced I've got something. And she said to me, Shaun, you'll be okay. She got anxious as a result of it. I was anxious. We got checked. We were both fine. The anxiety left. Now, after that, I remember I had a dream. And in this dream, I woke up with the back of a white guy in colourful boxers. I was 100% convinced I was gay. I woke up and I looked at the ceiling and I was like, I'm gay. That was it. That was my defining identity. I remember I walked into the bathroom and I just started throwing up. I was like, what is wrong? It was the collapse of my identity. But I do also think in some parts there's internalized homophobia from the community I've come from, but that's something we can explore later on, right? But there's a lot of research that shows that sexual orientation OCD is not always homophobia. It could potentially be homophobia, but there needs to be more exploration, because I've actually argued with someone on my page about that, which I think there holds some relevance, but let me not deter from the story. Yeah. Then what happened after that was I was smoking weed and I was with a girl that I was seeing, and I'll never forget. I'd smoked a little bit before she came and she was drinking and whatnot. We were having a fun time. And she
Sounds
sat on
like
my
a
lap.
great time.
Oh, it was.
Leading up to a good time, potentially.
Leading up to a good time. Hopefully and ideally, I was excited. I started enjoying a bit more cannabis because it allowed me to be myself. I wasn't overthinking my sexuality all the time.
Oh, yeah.
Because I was living with these obsessive thoughts about my sexuality constantly.
Yep.
Honestly, it was constantly on a loop. I couldn't watch TV without worrying. I couldn't be around my friends without worrying. I had command intrusive thoughts where I'd be around one of my friends, and if he touched me, I'd be sitting there just staring, waiting to figure out. Then the groiner responses, I had it all.
My God, yes. This resonates so much.
And then, so with that, what happened when my friend sat on my lap, I just felt this sudden panic come over me, and just the word rape popped into my head. And I remember I was like, oh, no, hold up, what's going on?
Yep.
And I quite literally pushed her off me, and I said, something's wrong. I said, I'm not okay. I'm not okay. There's something going on. And I remember I sat on my stairs, and I told her, don't move, please. I said, please, I'm terrified. I'm going to do something. The fear absolutely gripped me.
Yep.
And for anybody that's had a panic attack, they're going to understand. But for someone who hasn't, it's the sheer terror that hit me. It was all encompassing. And I remember I looked outside where I live, and there was a COVID testing center where I live. And I remember I just thought to myself, I must be hearing voices. I said, there's something going on. I said, why am I having this thought? And I remember I kept asking her, I said, have I done something to you? I said, have I done something? I said, have we had sex? I said, are you sure I haven't raped you? It was horrible. It's actually one of my worst fears, being a rapist. And I think for a lot of guys, it's probably our worst fear. But she was like, Shaun, no, you haven't done anything. And I remember I screamed at her to leave. I said, please leave, because it kept coming back. And the volume at which this thought kept coming back terrified me. So I tried to sleep. And when I tried to sleep, I saw images of blood and knives all in my mind. And I was like, there's something not okay.
Yeah.
And I put my shoes on, put my coat on, gave my keys to the COVID testing people outside of supervisors. And I said, I'm hearing voices. I said, there's something wrong. And one of the ladies said, no, you're okay. You're just high. I said, no, there's something wrong. There's something wrong. The minute I was no longer high, I was sober and I was okay. But by then, my friend came to see me. We ordered Nando's. The mental health team came to check on me. And I said, no, I'll be okay. I'm going to start my psychodynamic therapy. You know this probably yourself. Psychodynamic therapy is the worst thing you can possibly ever do for OCD.
Yep.
Because for what people need to understand is, with cognitive behavioral therapy, ERP, cognitive behavioral therapy doesn't get to the root of the thoughts.
Right.
You're not supposed to get to the root of the thoughts. You're supposed to... The brain conjures up all these juicy thoughts all the time, all these silly, whatever kind of thoughts you want to have. But the psychodynamic therapy, I remember I felt worse. Every single session I came out of it, I felt horrendous. And I was barely coping. I was barely holding on. Now, what happened next was, and this was the final breaking point for me, I was out with one of my friends, and I was sitting on the bus. And in front of me was a guy, and just a thought, fight him, popped into my head. I had another big breakdown. I was and my compulsions were, I would call my friends and all start apologizing, but like, there's something wrong. I feel like I'm being punished. I had the toxic guilt. I met up with all the people I felt like I hurt. I apologized to every one of them, and it helped for a while, but it just kept coming back.
Yep.
Kept coming back. Now, we went to the shop the same day. I said, I'll be okay. I've been with this breakdown before. Nothing for me to worry about. Went to the shop. Then the suicide image jumped into my head. It was the image of me jumping off a bridge. And I said to my friend, I can't do this anymore. So we ordered an Uber. I was crying in the Uber. I got home. And I remember I looked at my friend dead in his eye, and I said, I want to die. I said, I no longer want to be alive. And he started crying because he said he didn't know what to do. I said, I don't want to be alive. I said, there's something wrong with me. I just don't want to be here. I said, I'm depressed. Everything, all of these things. They stayed with me for the next 3 to 4 days, but people have lives to lead, so they can't always stay with me, but they did as best as they could. And then over the next couple of days, I was looking over the internet trying to understand, and I saw from my old mental health letters from talk therapies, they said they believed I had symptoms of OCD. Now, prior to that, I had done 12 sessions of CBT, so 12 sessions would be classed as high intensity CBT. CBT without the ERP it did nothing for me, Zach.
Right.
Zach, it did absolutely nothing.
Yep.
So I remember I called up the NHS, so that's the National Health Service over here in the UK. And I said to them, there's something wrong. I said, please, I need help. Can I get faster on that register? They couldn't do anything for me. They recommended me a book called Break Free from OCD. And I think you probably know, when your brain is in that place, you have no propensity to read. You can't absorb anything. You're just hanging on.
Your mind is scattered. It's scattered at that time.
Scattered. And I remember my therapist said, it's like a baby's brain, or like a fresh grass. It's just so soft. It can be manipulated. And on the Saturday, the 4th of June last year, I woke up and I said, I can't do this anymore. I said, I need help. And via Instagram, I don't know how this happened, even to this day, I found a woman called Emma Garrick, the Anxiety Whisperer, and I begged her for a phone call because I saw that she had dealt with anxiety and OCD, and she has a lived experience of OCD. I begged her for a phone call, and when she picked up, I just started crying my eyes out. I said, am I a bad person? What's wrong with me? Why am I having these thoughts? I said, please, what's wrong? She knew straight away I had OCD. You know, she said, Shaun, you have OCD. And I said, am I going to get better? And she said, look around. I'm with my husband. I'm with my kids. She said, you can get better. And I didn't believe her, Zach.
Yeah.
I didn't believe her, but she saved my life. And I remember we started therapy on the Monday, and for like 6 to 5 sessions, all I did was cry. And she listened. She offered me a space. She cared about me. She was an angel. She was the silver lining in my cloud, and I owe it and it makes me feel emotional because I owe so much to her. Yeah. I don't know where I'd have been without my therapist now. And I remember I said to her, how can I give back? She said, tell your story. The world will need your story. And that's what I've done. And there's times when I've cried just out of pure gratitude for how far I've come with my OCD, you know? Yeah. Because last year I still had to go and work. I still had to do all sorts, and I didn't want to do it. But having her around was everything, you know? So, yeah, OCD nearly took my life.
Well, I'll tell you, you're giving me chills over here for a multitude of reasons. One is just the fact that, you know, we come from different countries. We have different backgrounds. We have different upbringings. And I can literally picture my story inside of yours. And to see what you're doing now with it. Like, I remember being in the throes of thoughts of suicide, depressed, anxious, completely lost. You're going to make me tear up over here if you keep that up, by the way, because you are, you are so powerful. The people need to know this, though. They need to hear your story, man. I'm so grateful to have you on this show right now, and I'm so grateful that you're alive, because as you were talking, it made me realize to this day how misunderstood and misdiagnosed OCD is. And like when you were talking about the part where you went to the people and you were like, I'm hearing voices in my head. There are so many thoughts that come to mind in which a scenario played out completely different from, thank God, like, yeah, maybe it wasn't the most ideal situation where, you know, your friend supported you, but you still weren't on that OCD journey yet. But my goodness, there's still such a stigma there. So I don't want to go off on a tangent, but everything that you're doing and how somebody helped you, so now you're trying to pay it forward, is absolutely incredible. And I just want to let you know, man, that I know what it feels like to be that deep in the rabbit hole, to be thoroughly convinced that your thoughts are real. It's traumatizing on a level that people without OCD can't understand.
Absolutely. And I didn't expect to get so emotional, but
I love it. It's important.
Since having OCD, I've never been so emotional in my life. And, you know, I remember when I was, again, at one of my worst, I called Samaritans 3 nights in a row. It's the mental health charity. And I remember I couldn't sleep because my anxiety was so high, and I had melatonin. Some nights the melatonin worked. Other nights I had to take more. And I remember there was a night when I was by myself, and I was contemplating how to kill myself. Whether it was jump off a bridge with books in my bag, get a gun, knife, whatever it was, I was contemplating to take my life. And I said, if I don't sleep, I'll kill myself. And I woke up the next morning and just crying. I said, how could I think like that? How could I allow my temporary feelings to make a permanent decision? And I wrote suicide notes twice. I was ready to say goodbye to everyone. And I remember one of my friends, when he was going through a really hard time, he said to me, when he was going to a bridge to take his life, he said he thought about the people that loved him. And he said, I'm one of the people that love him so much. And I cried because I said, how could you do that to me, man? I said, don't take your life. And it just reminded me just of how torturous OCD can be. And people just still don't understand it. And the least I can do is give back, you know. Like the other day, I was, for like about the last 3-4 days, I was having obsessions about depression, arguing, the intrusive thoughts, the intrusive feelings. And this morning I did my exposure. And so I've actually got a piece of paper here where I was writing, I am depressed, I am depression, I am manic depression, I have depression type 1, type 2, acute depression, chronic depression. So I did my exposure and I'm far better now. It's just about practicing those tools. But people really do not understand OCD. And when I was in my place, there was one of my friends also is a paranoid schizophrenic. And I remember I was convinced I was hearing voices. I mean, 100% convinced, because I knew it was my own voice, but everything in my head was telling me, no, this is something else. And I called him and I said, bro, I think I'm hearing voices. He said, Shaun, you're not hearing voices because you said you think you're hearing voices. I said, are you sure? I kept asking him. And I asked him to explain to me what his voices are sounding like. He said his voices sounded like Professor X in X-Men. And I was like, are you sure that's not me? He said, Shaun, the fact you're asking me, it means you're not. And I was in a very bad way. Very, very bad way. And OCD brought me to the brink of suicide. And people do not understand how everyone goes, you are not your thoughts. It's very easy to say that, but for people with OCD, sometimes it's the intensity, the volume at which it comes that many people just cannot fathom until you live in the head of someone with OCD.
I just see myself in your story again and again and again. And it reminds me, like when I talk to people from around the globe, how, and you say this too, you said this when I was doing research on you, how you talk about how, and we're going to talk about the representation of different groups as it pertains to advocacy and OCD, but this is a brain disorder that does not discriminate.
Absolutely.
There is a genetic component, and we have not done there's not enough research to understand, to isolate those genes. I mean, there needs to be an all-out war on OCD. I'm so stoked to have you in this space, and you articulate your story amazingly. It hits me right here. It takes me right back to that place, and I think it's so important what you're sharing. But, I mean, to your point, when you are in the throes of the OCD, you are stuck in a maze, and everything terrifies you. I mean,
Absolutely.
I was scared to flip on the TV because I was afraid that if I watched the wrong thing, I was going to be flooded with images around my sexuality. Because I've always identified, so it's like I've always identified as a straight male as well as you, and I have nothing against people need to love who they love, and I'm all for that. But for me, that wasn't how I identified. And you talked about that stripping away of the identity and throwing up. Like, it's that visceral, and that's what people don't understand. It feels so fucking real. You're convinced. And I've been there, man. I've been there in my car, literally being like, I have gone fucking crazy. I have voices in my head. I have schizophrenia now. And by the way, for people listening, I have a much deeper understanding of schizophrenia. This was back in 2016 and 17 when mental health wasn't as talked about. So I did have a stigma towards all mental health. I didn't understand it. And OCD forced me to understand it, and I think I'm better for it. But being lost in the thoughts. So, I mean, the whole journey is so, I feel like I'm talking to me in a certain extent, and I think other people will resonate. Where are you at right now in the journey? I think that's important for people to know.
Yeah, and I think before I answer that, I want people to have a real understanding of what happened last year as well.
Okay.
So, because I think it will give people a lot more context. So I had my OCD diagnosis. I still had to try and live. I could barely work. I was struggling to do the basic things. As you said, if I watched a show on domestic abuse, I'd have thoughts like, am I a domestic abuser? Can I do this? Can I do that? I was having murder thoughts. I was having the thoughts of me tearing people's chests open, raping people. I was having it all. I still have the homosexual thoughts, and they actually make me laugh now. I've had incest dreams. I've had existential OCD. I've had every theme you can possibly imagine. I've had rape the baby thoughts, and I remember that one also made me panic, and I was terrified again. But so I had OCD. I was diagnosed with OCD. I remember I was playing football. And if I stood in goal, I'd have suicide constantly come into my head, even when I'm playing sport. I tore my ACL, MCL, meniscus and fractured my right leg in football. So I've been in recovery from that. So I need to get surgery later on this year. I ended up for 3 days in hospital with pneumonia. And I'd gone up on sertraline to 100 milligrams and I couldn't sleep. I was having the racing orbit thoughts. I'm not sure if you ever had like the thoughts.
What is that?
So it's when you go up on antidepressants, sometimes your brain has to adapt. Okay. And you can get more racing thoughts, more suicidal ideations, all these sort of things can happen. And I remember I said to the doctor, I'm convinced I'm going to kill people in this ward. I said, please, I'm terrified. The doctor said, I explained to the doctor, I know I've got OCD, but this feels so real for me. I fell asleep. And I remember in the morning I woke up. And again, I was looking for ways to take my life because I believed the thoughts. I believed that having these thoughts meant this is what I wanted to do. And I went to put my neck up onto it was, you know what they hang an IV drip on?
Yes.
I went to put my neck on it. And as soon as it touched my neck, I started crying. I said, what are you doing, Shaun? I said, stop it. Started crying. Mental health team came to check for me again. And I went home and I carried on for the next couple of days. And after that, I woke up one morning and I was having all the schizophrenia fear thoughts.
Yeah.
And I just said, I'm going to fucking change the world. I went downstairs, opened up my Google document, and I just started writing my story. That's exactly what I did. I bothered everybody I knew, every network. I emailed everyone I knew, and that's how I've been able to get to there. But so the pneumonia was one thing. Then my cousin was murdered. So the cousin I grew up with in Trinidad, he was murdered. Then his grandmother, my auntie, died. And then next, to add more fuel to the fire, and this is how serious and how sad it was. I was on the phone to my therapist and I said to my therapist, I want to have a better relationship with my half brother. And we were talking about it, and we were talking about how I can try and reach out to him again, because when I was high one time, I said to him, I really want a relationship with you. And I don't want to always feel like I'm making the effort and you're not giving anything back. And he just asked me to leave him alone, essentially. He said he can't help me with the search for the family. So I made peace with it. I'd blocked him, but somehow I had kept him on my Facebook and I didn't realize. And as I typed in his name, I found out he died. I found out my half brother died whilst I was on the phone to my therapist. So I remember when I told my therapist said, wow. She said, OCD is one thing, but you really have had everything thrown at you. Every single thing imaginable. I went to his funeral, had to handle that. There was so much that happened to me last year. People really do not understand. My auntie, pancreatic cancer, my mum's partner, my stepdad ended up in a home with vascular dementia. So many things happened, but all of those things were traumatic, but they ultimately have led me to be where I am now. And I write a lot about my story. I'm trying to create documents. I want to deliver a TED talk on OCD to get people to understand. I want to increase representation of OCD, because OCD, I don't like to use the word, as I said before in many other podcasts and many other conversations, I don't like to use the word whitewash because it's a pejorative. It's a negative connotation, but it's the OCD
it's the
space.
Truth. It's all white people, man, right now.
And it's white and females. The men do not talk up about OCD.
Yeah.
I've had so many men reach out to me and talk to me about their OCD. And I'm like, wow.
You're saving lives, dude. That's why I'm thinking, like, you have no idea how proud of you I am, because I know what you're doing is working. Because ever since I've been in this space, that's what happens. And what you're doing is you are adding another voice in the space that looks different from me and giving people that opportunity. I think it's just incredible.
Well, you make me feel emotional, man.
Because I mean it. You don't understand how important it is. And also what you're doing is an inspiration for others. Here's what I think. When you live with OCD, basically, because it's right now there's no cure, you have no choice but to turn your pain into power, is what I call it, or pain into purpose. That is what you are doing. And to me, that is what I did, and it is what has allowed me to live with a chronic brain disorder and not only tolerate it, but love it.
Absolutely. And I think for people that have OCD, I remember I lost hope.
Yeah.
I would look at support groups and I would listen to people talk, and everyone's recovery journey is very different. So for a while, I couldn't go to support groups because I'd get triggered. I'll just sit there and be like, I'm going to be like everyone else. I'm going to be on antidepressants for my whole life. I'm going to never get rid of these thoughts. But the one thing you've probably realized, Zach, is you don't learn to get rid of thoughts. Everybody has intrusive thoughts. Everyone. Right. It's just with us, our brain fires more than the average person. And anxiety is a learnt behavior. It's practiced. We have taught our brain essentially to fear thoughts. That's what we've taught ourselves essentially.
That's right.
And it's through accepting the thoughts, still being there and operating through that, we're able to live. And I think what I try to often let people know is I no longer struggle with OCD. I live with it. And it's a key point that you've spoken about. And I want people to understand that with neuroplasticity, your brain can relearn new behaviors. You cannot get rid of the thoughts. And I want people to understand that you can live with the thoughts. The thoughts do not mean anything. They don't say anything about you.
And so I always say that our OCD thoughts, and then I have a question for you. Our OCD thoughts are they're junk thoughts, and what I mean is that they're like an Instagram influencer that has nothing valuable to say, but they squawk the loudest on social media to get your attention, to get you to buy in to their content, even though their content adds no real value to your life.
Absolutely. Fantastic analogy.
And that's what you're talking about. So how did you, because you're fresher in the journey, so this is really important because people are going to hear this and they're going to be where you were a year ago. How have you been able to just lean into, I guess, walk me through the recovery journey piece then. How were you able to lean into that and get started into that? Because that can be so difficult for people.
Yeah. So as I said, I was sleeping in my bed one day, woke up and I was having all the thoughts. I didn't want to get out of bed. It was like 10, 11. And honestly, Zach, I just said to myself, fuck this. I said, how long am I going to be depressed? How long am I going to be sad and upset and do nothing about it? I said, I've got so much. I said, I'm not going to lose my life. And I walked downstairs, opened up my Google document, and I just started writing. I would show my friend, and he said, bro, you know how powerful this is for people out there? And I just started, as I said, I bothered everyone I knew, and I got one story published. And when I first published the story on the Book of Man, it was how I was diagnosed and treated for OCD, I think was the name of it. You know, I had so many people on my friendship list reach out to me and say, Shaun, I've got OCD too. I honestly had about 10 people that some people I've never met, and some people that I've just been friends on Instagram, and some people I have met, all told me they had OCD. And I was like, why did you never tell me? They said, because we didn't know anyone else was like that. And as a result of it, now I've been able to create a WhatsApp group with black people, and there's 24 of us now, which doesn't even sound like a lot, but it's huge. And with every article, every podcast, every interview, what I stand by is OCD was the worst thing to ever happen to me, but I'm determined to be the worst thing to ever happen to OCD. And with the lack of representation of OCD, I don't believe it's the OCD community's fault. with it being such a female and white oriented space, it's because there's certain ideas that still prevail within ethnic minority communities, that to have certain thoughts, you know, means the devil's in you. And I've had people send that to me. I've had people say your thoughts could be the devil. And I said, look, it's a brain disorder. It's not the devil. I said, you're allowed to think that. And I said a long time ago, it would have triggered me, but I know you don't mean any harm by it. And I try to use every opportunity that I can to tell people about OCD. I've had people reach out to me, people that I go to the gym with, that have come up to me and they've been like, Shaun, I watch a lot of your OCD stuff. I didn't realize it was that serious. And I'm like, wow, it's reaching so many people and they're having a very different understanding on it. And that pain that I have truly felt, to be tormented by OCD, to be locked into its vice grip, to be a prisoner to OCD, I often now say I am free at last from OCD's grips. And I'm learning how to manage it, to understand it, to realize, as I said to you, that recovery is possible. Recovery is not letting go of the thought. Recovery is not getting rid of the thoughts, but letting go of the idea that, as you said, these thoughts are just junk thoughts. Your brain is a machine. It creates all these fantastical stories. Do you believe every story that goes into your brain? Obviously not. So that's something with OCD I've had to do, but I'm empowered and emboldened by the people I really want to help. And I want people to come out of that darkness that they have with OCD. And with each person that's reached out to me and just said, thank you. They said, I've seen you on this podcast and I heard your story. Thank you. I saw, and there was a man that reached out to me and his message was, you've saved my fucking life, bro. And I was like, wait, what do you mean? He said, I've got OCD. He said, I definitely have it. A woman who was around her 40s said, I've suffered with OCD for the last 20 years. And hearing your story on Channel 4, I've realized I've got OCD as well. I was like, wow. So people will never understand that I do it for the people that don't have a voice and to give hope to the hopeless. So it's the least I could do. It's the least. And I want to have a meaningful impact on this world. And as you said, I don't want to be another influencer that just it's just a marketing ploy and a marketing toy. I want to be someone that has the right influence on the world. And I would like to believe that discussing mental health and not turning it into a moment, but turning it into a proper movement and a legacy is the one thing that allows me to keep pushing and to keep doing what I'm doing.
I mean, it's just complete and total music to my ears. It is, man. It has to be a legacy. You and I and everybody else that's in the space advocating, we are setting it up so that future generations, I mean, I think, and you're a big thinker, I can tell, so I'm going to just say this unabashedly, is like, end state to me is complete eradication of the brain disorder. That if we are able to study the genes, understand the genes, isolate the gene and remove it at birth, like before the baby is ever born. I mean, again, there's a lot of different ways to take it, but we have to take it past even where it's at now. Because right now, you and I every single day we fight for, because I always say with OCD, your world's always expanding or contracting. OCD will take everything from you, as you and I have both experienced, but you said, like, I'm going to bring the fight to OCD every single day. And to me, that's the mentality that I've shifted. I haven't been the same person in a lot of positive ways since.
Same.
Yeah. Since 2016.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Because you're forced to change.
Exactly. And in many ways, if it wasn't for a mental health breakdown, I would not be the person that I am now. And I'm not saying I asked for it, but you're right, Zach, that there's a beauty within that chaos. There's order within that chaos, as Jordan Peterson would say, whether or not you like him or not. I think there's some good quotes to take from him. But if it was not for everything that happened to me, I would not be as empathetic as I am now. I wouldn't have an understanding. And I'm hoping to go on to become a therapist at some point, because we need more male therapists as well. I want to change lives. That's something that's really important. I believe everyone should be able to function in society and to give their best to society. People deserve that. People deserve to have a meaningful contribution. And Zach, I'm sure you've probably realized, and yourself, as you said, we're both big thinkers. How many men or humans, but especially men, do you think we've lost to OCD? I'm convinced
so many.
We've lost so many to OCD who could dare to never say their thoughts because society wouldn't be able to understand?
It's thousands of men, thousands of people that we've lost to OCD because we are still in a society. And it's so funny. You touched on it lightly earlier. One of my best friends is black and he's super religious. And so I remember when I first came to him, I was like, bro, bro, you know me. Like, you've known me for a minute. I think I've turned gay. And he was like, bro, if you don't shut the hell up, he was like, you are not gay. He goes, that's the devil. Yeah. And he meant well. He didn't mean any harm by it. He was there to support me. I mean, he was with me through my wife and a couple other people. He was one of them. Were there through the thick of it. And a lot of things that he said got me through because one thing he would say is, nothing that is human is alien to me. And what he did is he normalized all thoughts with that quote. Nothing that is human is alien to me. And I think that we're still in a society now where we thought audit.
Yes.
We thought audit. And it's interesting too, and I'm so grateful that you're advocating. And one thing that might be interesting to get your opinion on too is like, with the rise of the Black Lives Matter movement here, especially in the U.S., a subtype now has become, in the OCD community, people being fearful of being racist. And
yes.
It's getting a lot of people trapped. And it's tough because it's like, once you know the history, you're like, okay, there was intense structural racism for so long that truly oppressed a group, and there were people that genuinely thought that they were superior to another group. So we want to never go back to that time period. We never want that to happen again. But then how do we, it's like the same thing with pedophilia OCD. How do you start to recognize that we are not our thoughts? We are not the content that we think about, and that our character and who we are as a person is different. I mean, I'm curious to hear your perspective on that.
I heard a saying that once said, the freedom to think is the freedom to offend. And I think we live in such an offense-led culture that we dare to not have certain conversations because, as you said, we thought audit. And the culture is a culture that renders too many things to the underground. And I often say to people, free speech is probably a really good thing because you have the opportunity to criticize and discuss ideas. And I speak about how cancel culture cancels certain mental health conversations because if someone said, one of my friends, great friend of mine, he's a gay black guy, he has pedophilia OCD and he can't talk to it about anyone. He dares not to talk about it to anyone. Yep. And I said to him, well, I'm going to have to tell your story to the world because people still to this day do not get it. And I have white friends who have race OCD, and I actually wanted them to do an exposure on me because I actually would find it quite fun on my end, but I know for them it will be really painful. But these are the things you do for the people that you love the most, especially with people with OCD. And I was saying this to somebody, how many people probably on the left-wing side have OCD anxious-like behaviors that have led them down the social justice route with this need to almost prove that they're not a racist? And
virtue
I was
signaling.
speaking to Stuart Ralph from the OCD Stories, the biggest OCD podcast out there, and him and I were talking about the Me Too movement and how after the Me Too movement, a lot of us men sit with this insidious fear that we could be accused of harassment, rape, sexual abuse, because the lines within certain conversations are being blurred more than ever. And let me give an example for listeners. I dare to again have these conversations. The best kisses on a date you don't ever ask. Women don't essentially want you to ask. They want you to impose your will. Now, there's some girls out there who want to be asked, but a lot of women like to be taken by surprise.
100%.
Now, if we live in an age of consent, not everything is consensual. Some things are non-consensual actions. Some things are consensual. And I think for a lot of men, the boundaries are becoming blurred because of the Me Too movement, which was good in some aspects, but the pendulum has swung too far. And I think that deeply affects the way we see sex and gender. I think for white people, it's the way we see race as well. I think a lot of people want to prove all the time that they're not a racist. And funnily enough, in other aspects of life, you know, even with paternal OCD, a lot of women are terrified of losing their because of the thoughts that they have.
Right.
And this is why I say to people that the conversations in society being shut down has wider ramifications, even in places that you don't ordinarily think that they would have. And that's why I said to you that cancel culture cancels out certain mental health conversations. And it shouldn't have to be like that, you know. And it's a fantastic question that you've asked me, that it really allows me to dig deeper into the way I see society, because I dare to live in a time where even if we can't get rid of OCD, I have hope. I've been on a psilocybin trial with Imperial College London, looking into the therapeutic capabilities of psychedelics. We'll go more into that in a minute. But if we aren't able to have conversations, how can we dare to help people? Right. You know, I can't explain that enough to people. You know, people should not have to hide who they really are. You know, so yeah.
You're a very important voice in the space, man. Because I definitely recognize that I have white privilege, but I think one area that you might have a little more privilege and sway is in these areas, because I think
absolutely.
I think people would be willing to listen to your perspective on that. Interestingly enough, another person from the UK that I follow, her name's Africa Brooke. I don't know if you know about her.
Africa and I are good friends.
Dude, she talks about, I mean, that's become her whole platform, and I follow her, and I think that she is just a fantastic counterbalance.
Absolutely.
Look, I mean, I think a healthy-minded individual doesn't want to be racist. They don't want to oppress people. They don't want to hurt people at their core. And sure, there are extremes, so I want to acknowledge that as well. But what you're talking about and being able to have open conversation, that, and Africa talks about this too, I think it's rooted in compassion, which is an energy that I get from you. And man, sometimes I think that compassion comes when you've been through something really, really hard.
Absolutely. I often say to people, there's a difference between understanding and understanding. To go through something, you have an understanding, but to understand it, to look at it from and not really to go through is an understanding. There's only so much I can articulate my experience to you until you've been in my headspace to really comprehend what has happened. That's right. And you're right, compassion culture is something we really lack. It's something we do not have enough in society. And Africa is a woman I hold a lot of high respect for, because we need to dare to disagree. Because I'm going to give you an example. That sounds like if I turn around and I said to somebody, I'm terrified I'm going to rape a baby, people go, you're sick, you're ill, you need help. Whereas for some people, it's a mental health illness. That's right. You don't give people even a chance to be able to understand what's going on. And the way we approach conversations and topics in society, I believe, is counter-destructive. And OCD is a great example of that. You know, it's a very misunderstood mental illness and it's trivialized. You know, OCD in the UK has 89p spent on it per patient, yet 1 in 50 people have OCD, and that's about 1 to 2% of the population. So that's around 750,000. And those are diagnosed. Now, let's talk about the people that are undiagnosed. People for years have thoughts. But because of the outrage culture we live in, we cannot say anything. And there's another example. There's a girl I saw on TikTok. She was talking about her race OCD. And I saw the comments. My goodness. TikTok absolutely went for her. White and black people and Asian people just going, you're just racist. That's all it is. Just say what it is. And this is what I mean by the dominant narrative of social justice and social change. It's straight judging people, yet they don't want to be labeled certain things. But you don't hear this girl's story. You don't look into anything to do with OCD, but straight away she's a bad person. And that tells you a lot about, the ramifications that are permeating every part of society. And Zach, it's from having these open conversations. For example, you and I probably don't agree on everything, but if we can find the things that unify us rather than divide us, there's that common shared humanity. And If it wasn't for OCD, I wouldn't have been able to connect with the people like yourself and the other people that I've been able to. OCD's widened my friendship circle. My therapist is a white Scottish lady who I wrote an article, and I need to actually get it published at some point. It's called "A Black Man Saved by a White Therapist," and
That's
this
powerful.
idea that my therapist, I'm an inner city London boy. My therapist is a white Scottish woman. We couldn't be so different and so far apart. But yet OCD was the unifying bond for us. And her and I spoke about this. I said, you're not going to understand everything with my experience, but I believe it, in my opinion, this is just my opinion for people who get outraged, that it's my job to articulate it as best as I can. You know, and I understand for some people a black therapist is really important, and I still, you know, in some aspects want a black therapist, but in the worst of my OCD, I couldn't cut my nose off to spite my face. How could I refuse help based on the skin color of someone when I was in a desperate place? And I want people to really understand that I don't discriminate based on skin color. I will help everyone. Yes, I've got a particular love or penchant for helping ethnic minority communities because there is a deep disadvantage. Now, again, statistically speaking, black people are more likely to be misdiagnosed as psychotic, even though we present with OCD symptoms. Racism makes OCD symptoms present very differently. Also, OCD patients across all ethnic groups are pretty much the same in the Western world. But again, in clinical trials with OCD, we don't have enough black people or other ethnic minorities. There are elements at play that do make a difference. But the work I do is to help all people with OCD. But I've got an extra love for the community that I know that doesn't have a voice. So I want people to really understand that a collaborative approach is needed, and we've got to work together. Because at the end of the day, I would like to believe we all want the same thing, Zach.
Ubuntu. One of my boys, Nashad, Ubuntu, he studied in South Africa, and it's like, I am because of us. And you're talking and he always talks about shared humanity. And he's a civil rights lawyer down in North Carolina. And yeah, man, I mean, that's it, right? My therapist was an Indian woman. Like, when I was in that spot, I didn't give a shit who I was talking to. And I feel connected to you. You're absolutely right. We probably, if we broke down every little thing, we probably don't agree on everything.
Absolutely.
But I feel connected to you, and I feel like we're kindred spirits because we've been through something similar. And it is connecting to, there's something, and it's interesting. I think this would be a useful exercise for politicians. Sit down, and before we talk policy, what is one thing that you and I both agree on, which is what you just talked about? What's one thing that we both value? Now, I also have a theory, and you're a thinker, so you're probably either already have thoughts on this or you're going to do reading on this. I think that there are a lot of sociopaths and narcissists and those types of individuals that go into politics. And I think that it might be difficult for them to feel emotions like guilt, compassion, etc. And if I just triggered you or anybody else listening, I have had fears that I'm a sociopathic, psychopathic murderer. So I don't hold anything back here because part of the podcast is it's meant to be an exposure too. So hopefully Shaun and I have exposed you a little bit. That's a separate side conversation, but as individuals, we need to get back to a place where we're connecting around some form of common humanity. But I do at the same time understand where you're coming from in terms of everybody is welcome at the table to talk to Shaun, but right now you're focused on a core group because they're underrepresented, and that makes sense. That makes a lot of sense to me.
And someone said to me on the International OCD Foundation page when I put the post up that I said, I'm trying to change representation of people with OCD. Someone said, your cause is noble, but you're only focusing on black people. I said, that's not true. I said, I want more black people to speak up, but I will talk to anybody. If anyone, there's not one person in my DMs who can honestly turn around and say I would ever air them. My DMs are open. Anybody can message me and I will make time for people. And it's because I know what it is to be alone. I will not ever intentionally try to make someone else feel alone. I will always try to get back to people as much as I can. And you're right. I think the social justice mob, which is what Africa calls them and other people call them, I believe they're moral crusaders. They believe what they're doing is for the betterment of society, which I think in some aspects is, but I believe the means that they go about it is actually quite counterproductive to what they want. It's thought policing, it's cancel culture, it's shutting down things that they don't want to hear. It's almost infantile behavior at times. And I think politicians, for example, Tony Blair is a great example, and George Bush, they destroyed Afghanistan, right? And I believe they're both warlords. They should have gone to The Hague like every other warlord, but they didn't. So that's a whole nother political conversation for an entirely another day.
Yeah.
But guilt, compassion, empathy, I think it's something politicians almost have weaned out of them, like a baby is weaned off milk. I believe the deeper and deeper a politician goes within the political realm, they almost have it leaked out of them. And I think the system milks it. And a great example or a great comparison would be teachers. A lot of teachers start off loving their job. They want to help people, but the bureaucracy of the system drags down the love that they have for what they're doing. And politics is in a terrible place. You look in America, how it's always very old men who are always politicians. We don't have any young bloods. We don't have anybody with certain ideas that I believe would revolutionize the way that we see the world. And not everything that is progressive is actually progressive. Some things are actually quite regressive. And you and I could probably have this conversation off this podcast about all of these sort of things. And I would like to see the progressive nature within the OCD community all over the place. And again, I can draw to another example. There was a lady who wrote an article who said, I don't mind when people say I'm so OCD. I read the article, and she spoke about how she believes that, in her opinion, people who say I'm so OCD, they're recognizing neurodiversity in their own way. And I thought it was a very interesting take. So I messaged her and I said, I actually really appreciate your article. And she was like, I didn't get to say that I actually also have OCD in the article. But before that, people had said, how could she say that? This is the issue. People are always talking about OCD and have no real understanding of it. And I replied and I said to people, she actually does have OCD as well. And people said it's even worse. She should know that. She shouldn't say that. And I said to people, you need to diversify the way you see recovery. Maybe that's the way she recovers. Maybe that's the way she copes with her OCD. So I believe we can't have this one size fits all approach.
Right.
And we're all on very different stages of our recovery. And if people open their minds a little bit more outside of their echo chambers, and I try to practice this every day, but I'm not perfect. I still make my mistakes. I believe we could do better for the OCD community as a whole, but also wider society.
I think that was a perfect example. I was having an issue with my mic, but I heard everything that you said, and I remember that article coming out. And actually, a lot of people in the OCD community, they posted on social, and like a screenshot of the blog, and then in the comment or the caption just went in on it. And I understand the knee-jerk reaction, but I read the article too, and it didn't bother me. One thing I always say is, like, when people know better, they do better. And I think that I've seen this in America, man, even with like the Black Lives Matter movement. When people start getting educated on various challenges that different groups have struggled with, most people want to do better.
Absolutely.
But
if you don't
better.
give people compassion, and you, as you said, you cuss people and you push them further to the outskirts, how do you expect people to want to be educated? Even in my everyday life, I was in a shop once, and there was a young girl. She said she was a psychology student. I said, I want to be a therapist. And I said, and she said, why? I said, because I live with OCD. She was like, oh, well, don't look over there, then it's not clean. Now, I was stuck at a crossroads. I could have shouted at her, could have got angry. I could have chosen to be emotional. I could have taken offense, because remember, offense is a choice. You take offense, it's not given. But then I took the other route, and the route was to educate. And people will go, well, I'm quite arrogant to believe I can educate. Well, I said I can only offer my lived experience and my research. So I said to her, look, I said some people would find that comment really offensive. I said, I don't, because I know you don't mean it offensively. I said, I know to you it's a throwaway comment. And I explained to her OCD is about intrusive thoughts. And she said she really understood. And I said, cleaning and symmetry OCD, well, someone might have an intrusive thought. And I said to clean or to have something symmetrical is the way they cope with it. It's called a compulsion. It's an anxious behavior. And you could tell she really appreciated the fact I was a lot more open with her. If I had shouted and I had cussed and I had got angry, what good would it have done? It would have put her further on eggshells. And I'm not saying people don't need to be cautious of the things that they say. In society, we do have to be aware that what we say does have consequences. But I believe for us to be half decent, civilized human beings, we can have more productive conversations, actual actions, not, as you said, knee-jerk reactions. I want proactive politics and not reactive politics. And I want that to be in every aspect of life.
Just beautiful. I mean, I think that you're a very important voice in the space, because one thing that I've noticed in the OCD community, and I'm very proud to be a part of it and be a member of it, there's this anger around when people use phrases like that, like, oh, I'm so OCD too. Throwaway comments, to your point. And I don't know if it's just my personality, if maybe you might feel this called to something bigger, so it's like I don't have time to like get hung up on this one comment. But it feels like, let's educate people, let's get the public information out there. But what you're talking about is calling people in, not calling people out.
Yes.
And it's, oh man, dude, the way that you talked about that, she must have left. And it's the ripple effect. You took an extra 2 minutes out of your day, gave her high level education. You nailed it. You gave her a quick example. You broke down the compulsion. You explained that it was a brain health disorder. And you know what? She is now going to have a changed understanding. 2-minute conversation with you. And not saying that you need to go around the world doing that every 2 minutes.
Yeah.
But she's going to turn around and she's going to, number one, change the phrases that she uses. Mm-hmm. And she's going to probably tell other people in her social circle. So the ripple effect that you created is boundless. And it all came from being compassionate. Absolutely.
And what I believe that is so important, you've given me such a great article title, Call People In, Not Call People Out. I love that. Actually, I'm going to be using that.
Please do.
You've inspired me, and I'm going to make sure I give you a mention. I'm going to try and pitch it and see what I can do with that. But
please do.
I understand it can be labor intensive emotionally, mentally for people to have those conversations. And I'm not saying it's for everybody. And we all have our strengths and we have our weaknesses.
Right.
But I enjoy having a conversation with people. It's so important to me. It arouses me in so many different ways, because I've learned so much from people. I've learned so much from my interactions. And even, for example, you and I having this conversation, I'm excited to see how our friendship develops, because I believe I found a great friend in you, although you're another part of the world.
I'll come over there.
Oh, definitely. I need to come to America. I want to come to San Francisco for the International OCD Conference.
There you go. I mean, I'm in California, man. So you got an excuse. And where are you in the UK?
I'm in Southwest London. London, technically.
London town. I'll come through. I'll bring wifey. Man. We'll hang out.
Come through, man. But this is what I mean by it's our shared humanity. And OCD was the unifying bond for my relationship with you and my relationship with other people. And I think the best way to describe that is call people in, not call them out. Yes, I believe people should be held accountable for their actions, but people are not perfect. I still make mistakes. I don't do everything properly. I remember there was even a time, someone else I met with OCD, they were talking about their fear of spiders and they didn't want me to say the words. And in my head, I thought I was helping them. And I said to them, spider, what's wrong with it? They got really offended and they messaged me later on and they said, oh, what you said really hurt me. And I took the time and I said, I really apologize because I didn't mean to hurt you in any way, shape or form. It was not my intention. And I recognized what I did and she really appreciated it. I could get angry and defensive and that's not how I'm going to be. I want to help people. So I recognize my rights and I recognize my wrongs, but it's opening up that space to have that dialogue is the most important part. And if we can have that in society for OCD, for people in the OCD community, out of the OCD community, those who make throwaway comments, as you said, we can bring them in, not always have to kick them out.
Absolutely. And you brought up something interesting, because I've actually cultivated a similar belief, but I do think it's a tightrope that you walk, because the way that I see it, right? 2016, 2017, if you said the word gay, again, love who you love. I mean, to me, that it's express yourself in your truest sense. But for me, I had always identified as straight. So when I start hearing these words, I start seeing these images and the groinal responses and everything, I was triggered, and it would run me through my cycle. So I was doing everything I possibly could to protect myself from whatever trigger was going to bring that up and make me feel those uncomfortable emotions. And I read a book, The Body Keeps the Score. It's a book about trauma. Yes.
Is it Matt Gabor?
I have
was it Gabor Mates? I forgot his name.
I have it right here. Hold on.
It's a great book. That's a absolutely fantastic book.
Van der Kolk. Bessel van der Kolk.
Van der Kolk, yeah.
The Body Keeps the Score: Brain, Mind, and Body and the Healing of Trauma, which was a recommendation from one of my friends, Asante Cleveland. But and he talks about his childhood traumas. But he's also a very compassionate individual. He experienced some traumatic abuse from his mother, both psychological and physical. And for a very long time, there were certain things that triggered him, but they don't trigger him anymore because, and by the way, I want to be clear, and Shaun, you'll agree with me on this, the work looks different for healing trauma versus addressing OCD, so it looks very different. But every single human being, I believe, is walking the planet with triggers based on whether it's genetic makeup, whether it's traumas from the past, whatever it might be that's impacting them, and it's bringing out this visceral reaction. We have it at our fingertips, and if we were able to start healing ourselves at a societal level, think scale, these issues, I think we'd be able to sit down and have a lot more open, productive conversation, because I think that there are a lot of hurt people now going out and hurting others. They're caught up in their own pain, and what kind of the light bulb moment for me is like, you could call me gay right now. You could tell me I'm going to get vulgar. You could tell me to go suck a dick right now. Because, hey, look, that's vulgar, Shaun, but it's the reality. Men are going to hear this podcast. I get guys all the time that hit me up too. By the way, not a single background hasn't hit me up too. So you're going to get the same experience. We're kindred spirits. You could tell me whatever. It's not going to upset me. I'm going to laugh at you. I think it's hilarious. But it doesn't trigger me anymore. And there also, once I started doing that, that's why I read The Body Keeps the Score. I started digging into my traumas from the past.
Absolutely.
And healing those wounds too, because I don't want those things to, in my opinion, bring out the worst of me. The anger, the frustration, the resentment from other things that have happened in my life. And I brought some amazing people on this podcast. Another guy who advocates for male sexual abuse. He has come so far in healing his wounds, and he's a much more compassionate, empathetic person, but things don't trigger him the same way anymore. And it's just like with you, I see it, it's like this ability to just have open, compassionate dialogue that's just so productive. So I know I just went on a tangent there, but you brought up something interesting. While I'm empathetic towards your friend in spiders, there is a side of me that feels that really the work is to get closer to spiders, become curious about the spiders, know everything about the spiders, let a spider crawl in your arm at some point.
Exactly.
You know what I'm saying?
But I can't, obviously, for people listening and for other people, we're not here to determine people's recovery journey, but ideally, in an ideal world, that is what they should do. Right. So the same thing with me, when I was suffering with the rape thoughts, I had to write a whole rape script about how I did it, how I was going to do it, the way I hid what I did, what girl I took. And I remember I was crying my eyes out. And again, my therapist said, Shaun, you need to do this. This is what's going to get you better. Stop running from it. With OCD, I always say to people, it's like living with your very worst fears, but you have to keep confronting your worst fears over and over and over and over again. So the only way we get better in society is, yes, by having a compassionate society, calling people in, not calling them out. But it's also being accountable and responsible for your own journey. And yeah, there's going to be times when you're going to need help. There's nothing wrong for asking for help. And I believe we have to start accommodating and encouraging people to ask for help. There's nothing wrong with that. But remember that it reaches a point where you do have to be self-sufficient. And especially with a brain disorder such as OCD, I know the pain. You and I both know the pain, Zach. But I want people to really realize it's actually an exciting time for OCD. There's psychedelic research that's emerging. There's new treatments that's coming out. So CBT ERP is known as the gold standard with an 80% success rate. But there's also a new treatment coming out of Canada, which is inference-based CBT, which is also shown to have very positive effects. It is an exciting time for OCD, and I want people to not lose hope. And some people would say hope is a poor man's currency, but hope is all we have.
Gosh, I love that quote, and it's true. Hope. I always say that hopelessness is the seed of doubt that leads to thoughts of suicide. I'm sure I can't speak for you, but for me, I was at the bottom. I was completely hopeless. I felt that nothing that I did was going to get me out of that that dark tunnel and get me away from those thoughts. And I will take the poor man's currency of hope any day of the week, because that was the seed of encouragement that led to recovery. I want to ask you a couple questions. The first thing I'll say is that I always tell people the goal with OCD is to never not have an intrusive thought again, because that actually subconsciously signals to your brain that some thoughts are okay and some are not. That the goal instead is to never fear an intrusive thought ever again. How did you, as somebody, because this is going to be something that people want to know, did you have any mental tricks, anything that you did to get you over the hurdle of like, okay, I've learned about ERP, I understand that I have to expose myself and then not compulse, but damn, it feels so scary. Was there anything that you did to just get into that space where you're like, I'm going to sit down and fucking do this ERP. I don't care what it takes. I'm doing it.
So I would say I have to give credit where credit's due, first of all. Having the therapist that I had gave me the skills and the tools to be brave. If it wasn't for her, I don't think I'd have been brave. So having, first of all, a therapist that is revolutionary was a massive conduit of for change for me. She believed in me. She trusted in me, and she knew I could do it, which in turn gave me hope. Another thing that I do to manage my OCD is I actually have a journal, which I journal in every single day.
Amazing.
And what I always say at the beginning of my journal, I'm going to open it right now just so people can understand. I always say, today has been a good day. And I speak about my anxiety or my intrusive thoughts. But I always end my journal by saying, I will continue to recover from OCD and anxiety. Thoughts can't and won't hurt me. I love you, Shaun Flores. So I'm always trying to affirm myself. And I speak a lot about practicing that ERP lifestyle. So when I was at the worst of my sexual orientation, I couldn't go to the sauna and steam room because there were good looking men with good physiques. So what I did was I said, okay, I've accepted I'm going to have these thoughts. I'm going to go to the sauna and steam room. I'm going to sit with the discomfort. I'm going to allow the thoughts to be there, but I will not move. I'm going to be there. I will not move. And that's exactly what I've done. I've always understood now that through research, obviously, and through therapy, that anxiety has a peak and it will always drop. So these are the things that I've realized. But as you said, the goal is not to get rid of the thoughts. It's to not fear the thoughts itself. As you said, you subconsciously keep teaching your brain, this is something for us to worry about. So as I said, I'm not perfect. About 3-4 days ago, I was obsessing about depression. I've got my depression script where I wrote, I am depressed, depression type 1, type 2, manic depressant, I am depressed. I kept doing it over and over, and I let it come. I mentally did it in my head. I said, I am depressed, and I let the anxiety come, let it drop. But I keep doing things in spite of how I feel. So what I want people to understand is the same way if you avoid crowds, and you're socially anxious, you keep teaching your brain it's something for you to be afraid of. Right. The most important thing to do with OCD is to understand you're going to be anxious, but you can handle it and you will be okay. I've had the anxiety where my legs get weak. I remember I went to deliver a speech. On my life, Zach, I felt like my legs were going to give way. But I just said, Shaun, this is anxiety. This is my brain getting ready to perform. This means it means something to me. So it's about trying to repurpose the way you see anxiety. Anxiety is a good thing to some degree. It's just us with OCD have a bit too much more than other people. It's like anxiety on steroids. So if you can reshape the way you see it, that's going to be important. But another thing I learned from a channel called Therapy in a Nutshell and Dr. Tracy Marks on YouTube.
Love that
Fantastic channels.
Yep.
The more you keep trying to fight anxiety is the more you teach your brain it's something to worry about.
Yes.
Allow anxiety to be there. Practice your willful tolerance, your practice accepting that discomfort, and it will go. It will always leave. I promise.
I mean, you basically packaged up the recovery process into a nutshell. Because you're absolutely right. If you respond, it's using the socially anxious example. If you're somebody who's socially anxious and so you spend less and less time around groups, and then you spend less and less time just even out, and before you know it, your world has become your room.
Yes.
The only way to reclaim your life with OCD is to push back against it, to fight it. And I love the affirmations that you give yourself, and especially the one that you're telling yourself over and over again every day, that your thoughts don't matter. It starts to sink in at the subconscious level where 2016 is where this all started for me. It's 2023 now. It's hard to, I still have intrusive thoughts to this day.
Same.
But they just don't mean anything to me anymore. And that's the part that sometimes I feel bad saying, because I know there are other people that are still in that journey and it's been 10, 20 years for them. The key that I always tell them, because they come to me and they say, Zach, I just want to be like you. I'm like, time out. What does that mean? I never want to have another intrusive thought again. Nope. See, that right there will keep you stuck for a lifetime. And your affirmation of my thoughts don't mean anything, they can all come and go, they're all welcome. It starts to teach your brain, new neural pathways are formed, and it starts to teach your brain, to what you were saying earlier, I don't need to care about this anymore. This just isn't something that matters. And I think your affirmations are what gets you motivated for you to have been able to do your ERP. And I had something similar. I wrote, I'm an OCD warrior. And I plastered a Post-it note up against my bed. And every morning when I woke up, I would read that and I'd be like, I'm going to fucking kick OCD's ass today. And I would go out to the table, I would drink a glass of water, and I forced myself, no matter what, hell or high water, it was 2 minutes no matter what. The goal was to do as much ERP for an hour as possible, because what my therapist told me, I got to give her flowers. You do such a great job of giving people their flowers. Was win the day. Do your hardest thing first. The hardest thing you could possibly do all day is ERP. Fucking do it. Do it. And then, of course, you can do it throughout the rest of the day as you need. I still do like real organized ERP sessions sometimes. I also do what I call micro exposures. I'm walking down the hallway here and my brain's like, you have HIV. I'm like, you're absolutely right. I contracted HIV and I am very close to death. I'm going to die today. So I'm going to get my podcast interview in with Shaun and then I'm going to die. But at least I fucking died pursuing my dreams. And that gets back to what you and I were talking about earlier with the purpose. I can live with these thoughts, like, because for me it was like, if this thing comes true, I'll end up alone, everybody will reject me, and I'll die. So like I really unpacked it. And if death was inevitable no matter what, whether the thoughts came true or because I was so suicidal I felt like not being around anymore, I was like, what the hell do I have to lose? If death is the only path, then fuck it, let's put it to the test.
Absolutely. You talking about that note, it reminded me, I bought a Post-it note and I just put up Post-it notes all over the house. It was, Shaun, you are amazing. Shaun, you are great. Shaun, you will recover. Shaun, you will do this. And I remember I'd look at it, my brain would repeat it without me, it was conscious. It became subconscious. And another thing what people need to realize as well, Zach, is you touched on something really important. Your brain may not always feel like it's operating with you there and then, but your brain will catch up. So anytime I go to bed, my brain knows, we're going to be offloading. We're going to get into the journal. Let's talk about our day. And my brain starts looking for the things to be grateful for, that gratitude mindset rather than being in the scarcity mindset. So keeping yourself in that abundance mindset has been revolutionary for me with OCD. I accept that no day is a bad day. There's going to be rough days, but no bad day is a bad day. Right. And that's something for people to really realize. And as you said, micro exposures. I have had the ones where I'll be talking to a friend and I have the thoughts that they're gay. And my friends and I will start laughing. I said, bro, I just had a thought about you. And he said, oh, thanks for that, bro. And we laugh about it. But
Yes.
it's the exposure that keeps mattering. It's practicing an ERP lifestyle. Do what is hard, do what is hard, not easy.
Yes.
Stick to the plan and do not allow it to change depending on your mood. And this is something I'm really realizing, that when motivation fleets, discipline is what keeps you going. And at the end of a principle is a promise. And that promise is what really sits with you. Your promise is to give yourself the best life. You are going to always be the best version that you're ever going to work on. You deserve to live, and you deserve to live in this world and to give to this world. And I believe, Zach, for example, we've been able to repurpose our pain, right? And we've been able to do podcasts and have conversations. And this is what helps us. But not everybody has to be an advocate or an activist.
That's right.
You can be an advocate or an activist even in your smallest circles. You can have small conversations. You can just live life and not have to talk about OCD. What's important is you are alive. That is the most important thing. And I want people to not always feel like they have to be obligated to help other people. We are all different. And I love the fact you said to the person essentially, time out. You're not going to try and be like me. You are going to try and be like you. Because when people have messaged me and they said, Shaun, I want to be like you. As you said, Zach, I've had to go, all our routes to recovery are very different. And I inform people, I still sometimes struggle with it. As I said, with the whole depression one.
Me too.
But I get back to basics. And I remember at the worst of my OCD, I could barely even eat one meal, Zach. I could barely eat one meal. And I had to go, all right, Shaun, we're going to have one meal. Then we're going to have a smoothie. Maybe we'll try and have another meal another day. We'll have a smoothie. We'll go for 2 smoothies. I just had to keep reteaching and relearning the things that were once simple. But another thing I want people to understand, when you fall down, the only way is back up. You can't go further. You cannot go further. So it's just the journey to recovery of OCD is an ongoing process. But I highly recommend people meditate, they journal, and they just remind themselves just how important they are. Affirm yourself. Affirm yourself. It is so important. It is, I can't begin to tell you how important affirmations have been for me.
You said at the end of a principle is a promise, and then you said getting back to the basics, which just fucking lit a fire inside, because I'm like, that's it, right? Because you're right, the motivation is fleeting. It always has been, it always will be. Discipline is what you have at the end of the day. Inside of your toolkit of discipline, we know you have ERP. We know you have your journal. You mentioned meditation. Now, I've been meditating since 2015. I did it for completely different reasons. I started because I read an article that top CEOs and athletes around the world were using meditation as a competitive differentiator. I'm a young guy, just got into corporate America. I'm like, oh, hell yeah. I'm going to start meditating. This is going to give me the edge. The intention behind why I started is not why I do it to this day. I do it for my brain, because it makes me feel better. It calms me down. It lowers my anxiety levels. So do you meditate as well?
Yeah, I meditate pretty much every night. I've been a little bit lazy with it at the moment, admittedly. But
I appreciate the transparency though.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. It's funny because I had an intrusive thought as you were talking. The thought was like, fuck you, Zach. And that's why I want people to really understand that I still have it, and we can have an open conversation because we get it. And I want people to again know that we're not perfect. And this is what I mean by transparency. I haven't meditated for a while. No, actually, no, I have. I meditated in the Uber on the way to somewhere. I just closed my eyes.
Yeah.
And I just allowed my brain to just relax. Yep. I allowed every thought to come in and every thought to come out, to not judge it, and for it to just be there. And we know meditation increases gray matter in the brain, which is again neuroplasticity, neurogenesis, the ability to learn new behaviors. And meditation for me, when I was at my worst, gave me a break. Yeah. It gave me a much needed break from my mind, because people often say, I can't meditate. I can't get my mind to stop. The key is not to get your mind to stop.
Right.
It's to be still with your mind. Let your mind do what your mind does.
Let it run without needing to latch on to anything.
And without trying to force it, let it do what it wants to do.
Right.
And eventually, by letting go of control, there is true peace to be found. And that sounds like some hippy dippy nonsense to some people, but I was like that as well. I used to be like, oh, shut up, man. Meditation doesn't work for me. I've been to a Buddhist temple and I fell asleep trying to meditate. And some monks have actually said to me, that's actually a good thing. It shows you're at peace. He said,
hell yeah.
and he said, maybe that's what your body needed. Your body needed some sleep. So things don't have to be perfect for people to do them. And I want people to understand that everything is work in progress. It's the idea of atomic habits. Be 1% better every single day to create that accumulative change. And as time goes on, you will see those rewards, right? And another thing that I've got in my toolkit is exercise. Because obviously I tore my ACL, I try to exercise pretty much 5 to 4 days a week. And even when I can't do 5 to 4 days a week, I just try to cycle. But that's something that helps. I've actually recently just got a cold therapy, a cold bucket. Is it a bucket or bath?
We call it a cold bath over here, but yeah, same idea.
So I'm going to be using that because we know that cold water exposure increases your stress tolerance, and it essentially it allows you to be anxious, but it teaches your body to shut down and to relax at the very same time. So you have higher stress tolerance. So these are the things that I'm going to be trying to adopt into my everyday lifestyle. I'm not going to be perfect at it all the time, but I'm always going to make an effort. One more thing I wanted to say is actually, as I'm talking to you, I've been building Lego. So I've been trying to heal my inner child, actually.
Oh, I love that inner child work.
Absolutely. The inner child work has been fantastic. And it just allows me to focus and to take my mind out of my racing thoughts. So that's another thing. I've built Groot, Iron Man, Venom, and Spider-Man. And I actually want to get the whole Lego store ideally. But these are the things that have really helped me. I've got back in touch with the things I love. And I needed that. I lost myself along the way due to OCD and other things that were happening in my life. And I've had to relearn to love myself. And it's a constant ongoing work. It's not, as I said, I'm not perfect every day and I'll always be transparent, but I want people to know that you've got to try. It is better to try because you miss 100% of the shots you never take.
That's right.
And it's better to have day one than one day. So that's something for people to realize.
That's going to be clipped and thrown on social media. I can tell you that right now. And you will be tagged. So I want to ask you a personal question here, and then we can start to wrap things up. What is your approach with substances? So for me, I smoked pot every single day for 7 years straight. I mean, that's just,
wow.
I smoked pot every day. And I mean, it's kind of funny, but like we would smoke and then we would freestyle. Like that was the shit that we did. So I was like addicted to that process. Like that's sort of my artistic creativity. My friends they make fun of me. I'm 31 years old. I'm never going to become a hip hop star, but I still rap in my fucking car. I love it. I don't give a shit what anyone else thinks. But I don't smoke anymore because it was a crutch for me. It became this thing that I did to escape. And then with the booze, that's not an addiction thing. It's more of when I do drink, the next day it makes me feel horrible. And I'm not talking just like, I don't even know what a standard hangover feels like, to be honest. I don't know what that feels like because I've had OCD since I was diagnosed when I was 22 or 23. I know what it felt like to be a young man. I know y'all can drink earlier in the UK, I think, but like, we're 21 over here. But I was drinking 16, 17, 18, 19. I didn't get hungover. I don't know if that was just being younger, but now when I drink, I disassociate from my body. I experience derealization. There's an uptick in my anxiety. So that doesn't feel as good. And then with the caffeine, if I overdo that, it builds up a lot of tension in the body. So I'm curious, with you and your journey, where have you landed with substances at the moment?
So let me start, from back to front. With caffeine, I actually have quite a high caffeine tolerance. It takes a lot more for me I can drink caffeine and fall asleep. That's the best way for me to describe my relationship with caffeine. Okay. I'm not a big coffee drinker. I've had like mushroom coffee, so non-psychedelic, so medicinal mushrooms like lion's mane, turkey tail, and the rest of the type of mushrooms. So I've had coffee, but as I said, I'm not a big coffee drinker. When I drink alcohol, funnily enough, it has no real effect on me. I get a bit more anxious, but I use that actually as exposure. And let me explain this. I'm not recommending this to everyone. So this is not me trying to say follow my route. But I was always terrified that if I took substances, I would be out of control. So what I did was I drank 3 glasses of red wine and I let the anxiety sit there, and I realized, oh, I'm okay. Yep. But another thing that I used to buffer that was I used electrolyte tablets before that and after that, because obviously alcohol dehydrates your body. So it allowed for me to be actually a lot less anxious. Now, when I've used cannabis in the past, I realized I was using cannabis as a crutch because I was using it to stop overthinking and stop being so shy. As much as I'm very confident, I still get a bit shy. I'm naturally quite introverted, actually, to more than anything else. But I realized being introverted, I didn't really get anywhere. So I had to learn and practice my extroversion. When I'd go out, I would have a little cannabis just to have a good time. And I would enjoy music on it. But I realized I wanted the high me to be the sober me. So I stopped doing cannabis as much. And to be fair, I don't trust most dealers. So I only really the best ever cannabis I've smoked was lemon haze. And my friend's Rastafarian dad was the one who grew it. That was the best I've ever had in my life.
Sounds fire.
Honestly, I would just sit there and just be like, wow.
Very, like, was it calming or
so
clear-headed?
Calming.
Yeah.
But then there were times after that, was it with her cannabis or was it someone else's? I'd wake up and the intrusive thoughts would just be at volume. So I stopped. I'm yet to try it and to see. So I'm also hoping to come off antidepressants. So I'm hoping to start coming off by Friday. Oh, wow. I want to start microdosing on mushrooms because we know mushrooms have really beneficial effects. And again, disclaimer for people. There was a 2006 Harvard study that was done that proved that psilocybin has massive effects on reducing OCD symptoms. But people, please do your research. Don't go and take my word as gospel. And also, there's a lot of people out there who are selling mushrooms not with the hope to help people. A lot of people just want to make money. So I want to start microdosing and doing really big trips because my friend grows them and I trust my friend. I trust my friend 100% to do mushrooms with her. Yeah. So that's something else I'm planning to do. I want to do DMT, ayahuasca eventually. There's a lot of different substances I want to take, but I would say the only substance that I really indulge in every now and then is a little bit of alcohol, but it's just mainly wine. But
me too.
As I said, I don't allow it to become my crutch.
One question on the psilocybin. Have you done anything formal? So I take shrooms about one to 2 times a year. It is by far and away my favorite experience. I feel so at peace and calm, and I have beautiful thoughts when I'm on the shrooms or psilocybin. Have you done anything clinically, like anything organized by chance? What was your experience like?
So I recently, as I was saying to you, with Imperial College London, I was on a psilocybin trial where they were testing out the therapeutic capabilities of magic mushrooms on OCD. So I think I'm allowed to speak about it now. We did 2 dosing days. One of them was a placebo. One of them was supposed to be the actual psilocybin. The first time I took it, I realized it was a placebo. But what I learned from it was I'm incredibly overstimulated. I'm always on my phone. So I spent 4 hours sleeping.
Oh, that's
pretty
nice.
much.
Yeah.
And talking and enjoying it. And the second time I took it, that's when I realized I was talking. And by the time one of the therapists had said to me, Shaun, look inward. I looked inward. I was like, I'm tripping. I was like, oh yes. My God. I was like, I'm tripping.
I know, it's so exciting.
And I just started talking, letting go of stuff. And I'm going to explain this to you. When I was on the trip, there was something in my mind that said, ask them for a hug. And I was like, I don't like asking people for hugs. I don't like doing physical affirmations. But there was something in my brain that said, you can't get past this level, Shaun. You need to work on the things you don't like. So I hugged them, held them, embraced them. Every time I wanted to let go, my brain was going, don't let them go. Hold them, embrace them, love them, say thank you. And there was another part that I saw in my mind was chains. There was chains being pulled out of me. And I think the chains were a representation of the emotional weight I carry at times and the mental weight I carry. And one of the therapists actually said in my integration session, so what people need to understand in an organized trial, and typically if you're going to do with someone who practices in psychedelics is something called integration, where what you learn on your trip, you try to incorporate into your everyday life, because mushrooms don't heal. They provide a stepping stone in which to aid your healing. So she said to me, it could be my ancestors potentially, and the chains of the freedom and so much more. So it was actually really interesting. So I would say the psilocybin has had incredibly profound effects on my life, but I'm not using it to heal. I'm using it to aid my recovery, in the sense of I want it to take me deeper and closer towards peace. So it was fantastic. And as you said, I want to microdose and do a big trip at the end of every month, maybe for 3 months, and see how I feel. But I'm sure you can testify to this, Zach. If you haven't done mushrooms, it's very hard to explain to people the euphoria you get from mushrooms. Life is almost illuminated. I remember when I first microdosed, I was on a work call, and I just started complimenting all my colleagues. I just felt happy. I felt busy. I felt like I could do things. And I remember I listened to music, and it just felt like a concert in my ear. It felt euphoric. I loved the feeling. It was beautiful.
Yes.
I just can't explain to people. It's almost you're in touch with the world. You're more connected to the universe around you.
That right there. It's almost, I think, what maybe one day as human beings will evolve to, where it really is this endless feeling of love and connection. Now we sound like hippies, but that's what it feels like. It's hard to, I mean, that's just, it kind of is what it is. I mean, that's what it feels like. You just feel so deeply connected, and you sort of see past all of the little bullshit that as human beings we get caught up in. It's almost like you start to see the bigger picture. I think you made a really important distinction, though, that you're using this not to recover, but as a conduit as an aid in your recovery. What is a big takeaway so far that you've had from it? I'm curious. Something that you're now integrating into your life.
So I realized I'm incredibly overstimulated. So, for example, doing Lego allows me to just be with Lego, to focus. Or, for example, even talking to you, turning my phone over and not checking for notifications, allowing myself to be fully present in this moment. And even my relationship with my mum, I learned to realize I can't change the way my mum is, but I can change my approach, and in turn that will change our relationship. So it's improving the interpersonal relationships around me, calling my friends. I'm not really much of a phone call kind of guy, but the people that I love and care about, they accommodate to me, so why can I not try and accommodate to them? Even though I don't like it, they do things for me that they probably don't like, and they're willing to do it. That's what love is, right? So all these things I've learned on my trip. But another really thing I've learned on my trip is I'm afraid of commitment, and that's commitment to myself. There's a great saying, let me find the saying for you, because this saying is the one that really sits with me.
Yeah, please do. And while you're searching, I'll fill some of the space for people listening. I think fear of commitment is something that's really relatable to a lot of people. And I think that there's a deep-rooted fear in, I don't know the direction you're going to take it, but for me, I think commitment was a big fear around failure, but mine stems a lot from being alone. I'm deathly afraid of being alone, and I it's something that I've been working on a lot. Were you able to find the quote?
Yes, I found it for you. But I agree with you in the sense of a lot of us are afraid to be alone because we're afraid of who we really are inside. True. And that's something we have to wrestle with ourselves every day. So the quote is by Marianne Williamson. I need to find. I want to find the full quote. Let me find the full quote. Because here we go. Our deepest fear is not that we are inadequate. Our deepest fear is that we are powerful beyond measure. It is our light, not our darkness, that most frightens us. We ask ourselves, who am I to be brilliant, gorgeous, talented, fabulous? Actually, who are you not to be? You are a child of God. Your playing small does not serve the world. There is nothing enlightened about shrinking so that other people won't feel insecure around you. We are all meant to shine as children do. We were born to make manifest the glory of God that is within us. It's not just in some of us, it's in everyone. And as we let our own light shine, we unconsciously give other people permission to do the same. As we are liberated from our own fear, our presence automatically liberates others. And that saying, that one there, who am I? Our deepest fear is not that we are inadequate. Our deepest fear is that we are powerful beyond measure. That's something I really realized. I think I've realized there's times when I'm afraid to commit to myself because I'm afraid how much more can I do? But that's what I need to do. And I think with OCD, it taught me I need to commit to myself a lot more. There's a saying, a typical Caribbean saying that is, dance in your yard before you dance abroad. So you have to learn to water your own plants before you go to give to other people. So that's something I'm really learning to do. And a big part of my recovery, yes, has been to be of service to other people, but I've had to also serve myself in the process.
I think that's been a big part of my journey, is learning that serving myself first serves everybody else. And yes. I love what you said in that quote. I'm going to butcher it, but it was more or less like, how dare you to play small?
Yes.
And the way that I look at this, Shaun, is, and again, for me, 2016 was the catalyst year for just all of these thoughts and thinking deeply about life, because as people with OCD, we're sort of forced to, when I say examine our thoughts, keep in mind that there are some thoughts that we don't examine at all. They're junk content, but it does make you start to go, oh, wow, there's a lot going on in my brain. There's a lot of different things to think about. And the how dare you to play small, for me, tracks back to this very simple idea that my life is finite.
Absolutely.
At best. With modern technology, I eat right. I discipline my life to health, right? I don't indulge in anything else. You know, I that's all I focus on. I think the oldest person on the face of the planet is 119 right now.
Wow.
And then I'm gone, man. It's done. And so for me, that knowing that it's finite, it's done at best. And 100 will round up to 120. And when I told this to my parents, they were like, whoa, you want to live to 120? I'm like, no, I'm just saying at best. I want quality of life too.
Quality. Absolutely.
But 100%. But if that's all I have, and then I move on to the next realm, whatever people believe, heaven, some people believe it's nothing. Some people believe that you're reincarnated. I'm not here to talk about those beliefs right now. But this time here is over. And so despite the fear of, because the way my mind goes is, if I play it big and I fail, people will see that failure. They'll reject me. They won't accept me for who I am. I'll be alone and I'll die. So that's my track. I mean, to a certain extent, then so be it. Because I don't want to play small. Because the time is just too short. And if there were other things that, I'm not saying everybody needs to start a business or become an advocate, but whatever it is that drives you, that you're interested in, that has meaning to you, why not go all out with that thing? Because the time is just so short.
And regret is a horrible thing to have. If you have a dream and it's truly something you want to do, try. It's the least you can do, but at least you tried and failed. And failure is one step. Some people would say failure is divine redirection. I think I heard a saying I heard recently. And I'm not very religious, but everything happens for a reason. And Zach, it's better you're trying than to not try at all. You could change one person's life, two people's lives. Those are lives change. And as you spoke earlier, it's that ripple effect that has a profound difference on the world. And one of my biggest mottos is to leave the world in a better place than I found it. I believe it is our responsibility and our duty in society to do what we can to advance society in more positive, productive, and progressive ways. And everyone's got a different idea on that. All I can try and do is put my ideas out there. And for example, I'm humbled and grateful that you've given me a chance on your platform to be able to do that. But when you think about what your podcast is, I quite often say that my podcast would be, I'm the car driver, someone else is my guest. I drop people off at the guest door. That's what I quite literally do. And that's what you've been able to do for me. You've given me a chance to be on your platform, for people to hear my ideas, to hear my story. And you're giving somebody an opportunity for hope. You're giving somebody an opportunity to hear something different. And people can't ask for anything more than that. I look at society, and it's conversations that truly heal. Conversations, the exposure to different ideas, the way we see mental health and recovery when it comes to OCD. We can give people a chance to explore different concepts and ideas. Like, what more is exciting about life than that? You know, that finite, you know, some people would argue that when they've been on mushrooms or ayahuasca, they realized how insignificant they are in the world.
Yes.
They realized that their ego had absolutely died, and they realized there was so much more to this world than just all the things they wanted, whether it was ego and pride. As we said, how dare you play small in the world? The world needs you. And I want people to really understand that you are loved, you are cared about, even when you don't feel like it. There's a difference between a feeling and your reality. Your feelings, yes, at times can make up your reality. But if you were not loved, you wouldn't have people around you who try to keep you alive. And even when you think you are alone, you are not alone. And I want people to really understand that, most importantly.
Shaun, that's it. That's where we're going to end this podcast, because that's it right there. That's the message, man. And you're absolutely right. We're not alone. And there are so many people out there that love us. And then there's people like you that you have a love for humanity and you want to help. And I think that there's tears to that love. And you're right. So to anybody listening, Shaun nailed it. You're not alone. And there's so many of us out there that are there to help you. And Shaun, I just cannot thank you enough for this conversation. We're definitely going to have you on again, because there are so many more things that I want to talk about. But before we close, is there any advice that you wish you would have received that you want to share for people that are right at the start of their journey?
That's a really good question. It's a really good question. What advice would I want to give to people that I wasn't able to get myself? You're not the only one with OCD. And in a very, this probably sounds quite backhanded, but what makes you think you're so special that you're the only one out there with OCD? Because I was like, nobody else in the world can have this like me. I believed I was the craziest person on earth. I was like, no one else can have this like me. Until I was very humbled by the fact several people out there were like that. I think at times, as humans, yes, we all have very unique struggles, but if I had known there were more people out there with OCD, especially from my community, I think it would have made it. I'm happy for where I am now, but I wonder what difference it would have made if I had known, oh my gosh, God, there's other people really like me. I'm not the only one. But because obviously OCD is not really presented in the media in a certain kind of way, it can be quite hard to access unless you go deliberately searching for it. But I just wish, well, my therapist was quite honest with me. She said to me, Shaun, you're not the only one in the world of OCD. And she said it in a loving, kind way. But I think something different then would have been, it's going to be the hardest journey you're going to ever have to go through with your life, but you will make it through. Because if I was lied to about OCD, I'd have set up my expectations very differently. But I knew it was going to be hard. I knew it was going to be hard. And I think if the NHS or other services had told me how hard it would have been and to not really sugarcoat it, it would have put me in a very different place. But thanks to my therapist who informed me and told me the truth, she gave me back life.
That's awesome, man. You're absolutely right. And yeah, to those listening, it's not an easy journey, but you will make it through, to Shaun's point. And yeah, man, I'm just really proud of you. I feel lucky to know you, and I hope that a friendship gets formed here and we can help each other out, because I think that there's a lot that we can do together to push this community forward. So I appreciate you coming on the You're Not Alone podcast, and we're going to have you on again soon.
I'm looking forward to it. Let's make it happen.
Awesome. Appreciate you, man.